having these memories. I see flashes. I think I had a life here. But I can't tell if it's real.
What's going on, YouTube? This is Venomous Media, back with another video. 2019, what a year of disappointments in film. We learned that our favorite Jedi of all time, Rey, was the granddaughter of Palpatine, and she became a Skywalker. Charlie's Angels had its fourth outing in the 21st century. I said fourth, since ABC tried that show back in 2012. We also got one of the most overrated movies featuring Black Widow and Kylo Ren bickering from start to finish, and the only thing good coming out of it was a bunch of memes. John Wick 3 was probably my favorite film that year because, well, I grew up watching action movies. Arnie, Sly, JCVD, Norris, Seagal, Jackie, Jet, etc. were a huge part of my childhood. Anyway, what about comic book movies that year? Well, we did get The Joker, which did go on to make $1 billion, was also the first R-rated comic movie to gross that much. So I will defend that movie till the end. I mean, I love to take on the character. Just a shame it was tainted by an unnecessary sequel. We also got Shazam. It was an okay movie. I don't think it was as great as the hype suggested, but it was fun, and Zach Levy was great casting in the role. Pretty much carried the movie. Avengers Endgame I thought was overrated too, but at least Captain America and Tony Stark got great send-offs. But sadly that'll be tainted too, since, well, RDJ is coming back as Doctor Doom. And 2 years after we got the classic that was Logan, Dark Phoenix was the final nail in the coffin for the X-Men Cinematic Universe from Fox. Which is sad because I still love the first two X-Men movies. And sadly, the MCU version of Spider-Man has failed to make an impact. There was a Ron Perlman-less Hellboy reboot, which to nobody's shock failed. And last, but certainly not least, there was one last comic book movie that some described as groundbreaking, and a first for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's the subject of today's video. I'm talking about Captain Marvel. Now, this won't be a full-on retrospect like some of my other comic book movie retrospects, where I break down everything from the source material, cast, production, and the movie itself, and give the good and bad. Today, I'm really just here to talk about the character's lack of appeal, and some of the flaws with the movie. Yeah, I know her first outing on the big screen was a success, but I feel there's a lot we need to talk about. But if you would like me to do a retrospect on Captain Marvel, let me know down below. Anyway, let's get into this. So on March 8th, 2019, Captain Marvel finally made her MCU debut after trying to get off the ground for the last several years and almost making an appearance in Age of Ultron and being teased at the end of Infinity War. She was becoming the talk of the town in the comic book movie world, since she would be the first female hero in the MCU to get a solo film. So it seemed like it was a home run for Disney, the MCU, and comic book movie universe, since, well, it made $1 billion and got good reviews, or so they say. Anyway, why am I making this video? Well, many of the comic book movies from that year were either terrible or overrated. Well, Captain Marvel was both. And I'm not shocked since, well, the Captain Marvel version of Carol Danvers is a terrible character, and her apologists go out of their way to defend the character by saying, well, that's how she is in the comics. Well, a couple things. Just because she was written by crappy writers like Kelly Sue DeConnick and Kelly Thompson doesn't justify making a crappy movie version, especially when you got something like The Boys, which many people agree the comics are a hit or miss, but the show is much better than the comics because the characters, specifically the 7, have more personality, are just more interesting compared to their comic counterparts. So yeah, they didn't do that with Carol Danvers in the MCU. Anyway, in those comics, we got a bunch of crappy storylines and art. It's just Kelly Sue DeConnick spilling her guts to how she feels about the world. And of course, the life of Captain Marvel is probably one of the worst comics ever, since it's basically the equivalent of a soap opera where it's revealed that Carol herself was a Kree this whole time. So yeah, they didn't want her to be connected to Mar-Vell since, well, he's a male hero, so we can't have that. And how exactly did she become Kree? Well, her mother was a Kree this whole time. Yep, the whole story is about thinking her father was having an affair, but she learns that her mother is Kree at the end, and that her father was keeping it a secret from her this whole time. And you know what else? Her mother gets a very anticlimactic death at the end. So yeah, we're off to a great start with such amazing source material by two men-hating feminists. Gee, if only somebody would adapt this into a movie. Well, here we are today. Anyway, here's the plot off of IMDb. Carol Danvers becomes one of the universe's most powerful heroes when Earth is caught in the middle of a galactic war between two alien races. Gee, if only this came out in the late 2000s when Mass Effect was the standard for science fiction, because that probably would have been an awesome plot back then, way before we had trash writers like DeConnick and Thompson invading fiction. Anyway, in the movie, when we first see Carol training, she's already showing girl boss-like traits, who's angry and out of control. And the version of Mar-Vell in the movie, who they made a woman by the way, played by Annette Bening, is even acknowledging that Carol is too angry and emotional. So okay, if the men can't get through to her, maybe the female mentor can? Well, we eventually see a bunch of montages of Carol's past, including a bunch of men being the devil to her, but we at least get a moment of Carol as a little girl with a dream. So okay, maybe there'll be some kind of relatability or humanity within the hero to make us care.
Nope.
Yeah, when she's an adult, she becomes an entitled brat who acts like the world revolves around her, and most of the men are problematic towards her or inferior to her in some way. Anyway,
those bad guys still in there somewhere.
compare Carol Danvers in the MCU to some of the other characters we have, like Steve Rogers, a selfless man willing to make the sacrifice to fight for his country and becomes a super soldier just to do that. Also Tony Stark, a billionaire playboy and larger-than-life inventor, getting kidnapped by terrorists and having his heart replaced with a robotic heart, and pretty much becomes part machine and now fights crime. Then you got Thor, the god of thunder, who's banished and tricked by his brother Loki, who he has to stop. So whether or not you like any of the Captain America, Thor, or Iron Man movies, well, as characters, they are written so much better than Captain Marvel. If you are a casual moviegoer who knows little to nothing about comics, and your only knowledge of these heroes are cartoons, games, and movies, well, the three former are much better characters than Captain Marvel. Because for the most part, Carol Danvers lacks that humanity or reason for people to care for her. And I'm sorry, but a girl boss character at the forefront is never going to work long term. Captain Marvel might have been a fluke. But look at She-Hulk, who in the comics was soft, kind, strong, and still feminine. But in recent years, the comics have turned her basically into regular Hulk in a dress. Well, the MCU made her into another entitled female character, and as of now, there is no Season 2 plans. And there were even rumors that apparently were debunked that she was supposed to be in Deadpool and Wolverine. But you never know. Maybe that was a possibility at one point. Anyway, just like Ray, Carol is a super Mary Sue and almost never struggles. And I never get why it's so wrong to see a female character having struggles and showing vulnerability or even just being kind, because that shows humanity and will help them on their journey to developing into a better character. In her Miss Marvel comics, we see Carol displaying humanity and having feelings throughout her books. Like in one comic, she rescues a little boy and girl and comforts the boy. In another comic, she reflects on a relationship she had in the Air Force with her colonel and is saddened that they didn't last. And she even has a moment with Marvel after rescuing him from Ronan the Accuser, rather than being a girl boss like she is in the movie. Look, I'm sorry, but seeing Brie Larson with a stank face gets boring real fast. Anyway, like I mentioned earlier, Captain Marvel was teased at the end of Infinity War, which was really smart marketing in my opinion, teasing her for a big event movie, because if they didn't tease her back then and just show her off to the audience with standard marketing, I guarantee it would not have gotten anywhere near $1 billion. I think at best it would have gotten Ant-Man numbers. Look at that sequel to Marvels. It's the MCU's worst movie box office wise. And some say it was because of the strike going on at the time. That's why The Marvels wasn't a big hit. And who knows, maybe there is some truth to that. But I don't know if I can fully agree. People tuned in for her in her solo movie and Avengers Endgame, and were likely not impressed. And even if the strike didn't play a factor, I think it would have again gotten Ant-Man numbers, because look at the third Ant-Man movie. That happened before the strike, and it was a disaster. And The Marvels was even worse. Also, slightly off topic, when the HBO Max series Velma was made, it got a second season because people checked out how bad it was the first time around, but most of them didn't return for the second season, and it was canned. So I stand by what I said, saying Captain Marvel had the advantage of being in Infinity War. I have to ask, who does this character appeal to? Certainly not to the comic fans, since it took Marvel 10 tries to give Captain Marvel an ongoing series that fans just weren't there for when she went from being Miss Marvel to Captain Marvel. It's sure not the MCU moviegoers, since they didn't stick around for the sequel. Casual moviegoers don't have a reason because, well, compared to some of the other solo characters, she's just nowhere near as interesting. So what about women? Are they interested? Probably not. I promise you most of them are not spending their money. Yeah, they might make fan pages and you might see cosplayers who don't know squat about the comics, nor can they at least give us a good reason why they enjoyed the movie version. These cosplayers likely hate Captain Marvel deep down, but they want prizes and free trips and free movie passes to see this garbage. And I hate to say it, but you cannot rely on fan pages and cosplayers to support a movie or any kind of project like this, because all they're doing is supporting any feminist agendas from the sidelines that these movies may have. And when it comes to their wallets, yeah, most of them are not going to spend their money. And I need to point out, for a science fiction movie with a cosmic character at the forefront, it's very lackluster. Again, like I mentioned, on paper the plot could have been cool, And nearly 2 decades ago, Mass Effect was the standard for science fiction. I mean, we could have had some awesome space opera type story with inspiration from Star Wars pre-Disney, classic to 90s Star Trek, Mass Effect before Andromeda, and any other kind of iconic science fiction. But it doesn't really feel like a space opera beyond Captain Marvel having cosmic abilities. It honestly feels like it's trying to be a Spider-Man movie, except with cosmic powers, instead of a slightly grounded story about a superhero with spider-like abilities. And the overall final movie we see is very basic and boring. It's also a chore to get through, and there are so many stupid and predictable twists and turns. And overall, there's never any real payoff with the movie or Captain Marvel herself as a character. Also, Captain Marvel is set in the 90s, and we see lots of references to pop culture at the time, including Blockbuster, but for a 90s throwback movie, it's just boring. And this is something I will never understand. Outside of characters like Captain America, or future characters like Spider-Man 2099 or Cable, why do they try and have characters in different time periods, instead of just being like comics and going with the current time? Because it feels like it's a lot of unnecessary work, and there's no logical reason for this to be set in the 90s instead of current times, unless they're just trying to sell a nostalgic time period. Also, the villains are very lame and forgettable, and make Arnie's Mr. Freeze look godlike. And that's the thing with these pieces of science fiction. It's the villains that really make them memorable, like Darth Vader or Saren from Mass Effect. I mean, there's literally a scene where Captain Marvel is shooting Nerf guns at the bad guys, while Just a Girl by No Doubt is playing. Also, just like many of the MCU movies, the humor misses the mark. There's really never a funny moment at all. I think the director wanted us to laugh when she beats up the guy on the motorcycle and steals his clothes. Butch is cringe, and honestly, that makes her a criminal. But she's a girl boss, so she gets a pass. And to be honest, when the movie was in pre-production, I feel Brie Larson was only cast because of star power reasons, since she won an Oscar back in 2016 for The Room. And I'm not saying she's a bad actress, but she wasn't exactly memorable in the role like Snipes as Blade, Jackman as Wolverine, Reynolds as Deadpool, Keaton as Batman, or even Chris Evans as Captain America. Also, given the current state of Hollywood, I don't think star power in the industry is important like it was back then, where you could cast a Jack Nicholson, Christopher Lee, Marlon Brando, etc. to add prestige to a movie in an attempt to try and sell it. Again, this movie did as well as it did because she was teased at the end of Infinity War. Larson absolutely did not contribute to the movie's success. Again, she couldn't even sell the Marvels by herself. Case in point, star power doesn't matter if she still has it at this point. Also, if this was a Miss Marvel movie, I wouldn't have cast Brie Larson. And to be honest, I don't know who I would cast since I try to avoid most current movies. But back in the 90s, Bridget Wilson at her peak would have been great. For me, an ideal Carol Danvers actress needs to be someone that can be feminine, humane, and badass. Also, both her and Monica Rambeau's mom, Maria, who's a single mom by the way, unlike the comics where Monica's hero was her father, but he is nowhere to be seen. Anyway, both Carol and Maria come across as masculine at times throughout the movie. And to be honest, it seemed like the movie was hinting at them being attracted to each other. Of course, more shipping nonsense. We can never have a close friendship. Because look at some of their interactions. I mean, I don't know, the energy, it makes it seem like they wanted them so bad to be a couple, but stopped at last minute. Anyway, I truly think if this movie was made during Phase 1, it would have been much better than what we got in 2019, since we did have some pretty solid Miss Marvel books from Brian Reed. I mean, they're way better than what Kelly Sue DeConnick and Kelly Thompson have written, because back then at Marvel and DC, you actually had to have talent for writing and drawing art. So yeah, a crappy version of a once great character getting a crappy movie, no shock in this day and age. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say about Captain Marvel. Did any of you like the movie? If so, what'd you like about it? If not, what didn't you like about it? Also, comment down below if you want me to do a full retrospective Captain Marvel. Also, comment down below if there's any other retrospect you want me to do about a comic book, movie, show, or whatever. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. This is Venomous Media signing off.